Hello, and welcome to another segment of the Coatesville Area Public Library's Oral History Project. I'm talking today with Mr. Herman L. Whiteman, who is a native Coatesvillian, meaning he was born here in Coatesville. He's lived here all of his life, and I'll let him tell you exactly when he was born. Good morning, Mr. Whiteman.
Good morning.
Glad to have you with us today.
Thank you.
You mentioned to me that you were born in a tiny little house on the other side of the tracks, I think, as you put it.
That's right.
Tell us about that house.
Well, that was North 2nd Avenue. At one time went up over top of the Pennsylvania Railroad at the east end of the bridge. And the crossing had been removed at the time I was born because I was born March 15th, 1914, and that crossing was moved years before that. But North 2nd Avenue was at that time called Railroad Street previously. And then they named 2nd Avenue as we know it today and used the name Railroad Street for what we now know as Fleetwood Street.
And talking the streets of Coatesville, what kind of paving material did they use back then?
In the center of the community, there were mostly brick streets. Main Street was brick with the trolley tracks down the middle of the street. Even Diamond Street, I remember being a brick street. The West End was brick, and Strode Avenue was brick. Valley Road was brick back in those days. And South First Avenue was brick. And at one time, the trolley from Westchester, the tracks were laid around First Avenue down into South Coatesville, but I don't think they ever ran the trolley over it after the tracks were put in.
Was there a reason for that you know?
I don't know.
No. Well, with the trolley transportation in Coatesville, can you remember any of the routes that the trolleys would follow?
There was a trolley that came from Westchester to Coatesville through Downingtown, and of course you could make a connection in Westchester from a trolley that came out of 69th Street. There's also the Conestoga Traction Company ran a trolley from Lancaster to Coatesville, which came down through Christiana, Atglen, Parksburg. And they also at one time had a freight depot over near the West End Fire Company, where they had a spur that went in from the street. They'd bring merchandise down on one of the trolleys. And that trolley would make connections from Lancaster to Mannheim to Mount Gretna to Lebanon, because my grandmother had relations there, and I remember traveling that route to get there. And of course, you didn't do it in an hour's time like you do today.
No. These were horse-drawn or electric?
No, these were electrical trolleys.
Electrical.
Yeah.
Through the Depression years, as most people did, it was whatever you could do to earn a living. Tell us about your experiences there.
Well, I did some work on the state highways, patching roads, shoveling snow in the wintertime, because you didn't have big snow plows like you have today. And I can remember the winter of 1933, and I mean, we had a deep snow. You went out with a shovel brigade, 50, 60 men, to move drifts. And also, I did farm work. I used to sucker corn out in the fields, and you'd be in that corn all day long. And I always knew when it was time to go into the milk house to eat lunch, because at 11:45, there was an airplane that went over top of the cornfield. And I learned that that was getting close to lunchtime, and I always used that as my timepiece to go in to eat. But the corn is different today, the way they process it. You don't go into the field and sucker corn anymore. And I dug ditches, dug out mud from the spring houses in order to put troughs in to cool the milk before it went to the creamery. And of course, those days, a lot of the horse and wagons were used to haul the milk out to a stand along the road where the milk truck could pick it up. It was in cans then, large milk cans.
You mentioned you had some experiences with firewood as well.
Well, Yes, a friend of mine who was still going to high school, he had a large thick body Ford truck, a 29 Ford truck, and he wanted to get into the wood business to make some money, and he leased some land up west of Wagontown and hired another fellow and I to go up there and cut the trees down, cut it up into 4 foot long, what we call cordwood. A cord is 4 foot high, 4 foot long, and 8 foot the other direction in the pile. And in order to get a ride home at night, of course, we had to load the truck, and $5 a week was a lot of money in those days. I'd give my mother $4 for board, and I had $1 to take my girlfriend to the movies and a couple of sodas at Laggie's Fountain.
And where was Laggie's Fountain?
In the old Palace building in Coatesville. That building's still standing. If you look up above, you'll notice that the building is still standing there.
And this is where in Coatesville now? On Main Street, of course?
It's right at 2nd Avenue.
Main Street,
Right at
2nd
2nd Avenue. Just east of the furniture store there, or west of the furniture store. It's still standing. And the Palace Theater, of course, was a competitor to the auditorium. And then later, there was a motion picture house at 7th Avenue and Chestnut Streets. Called Silver Theater.
Silver Theater.
Yeah.
So we had the Silver, the Palace, and the Auditorium.
That's right.
3 movie theaters in Coatesville.
You ever hear the term Midway in
Yes.
Coatesville?
Yes.
Midway refers to the West End. And I never knew how that name came about, but in some of the history that I've looked at in Coatesville, they referred to the town of Coatesville as Midway. But Midway was established apparently because when Pennsylvania Railroad first put the tracks in from Philadelphia to Columbia, Pennsylvania, the midpoint of that railroad was about 500 yards east of the bridge that they're putting in over there now. And while we're talking about bridges, that's the 3rd bridge I remember at that location. Also, the Kurt Strauss Bridge
Yes.
in the east end of Coatesville is the 3rd bridge I remember at that location.
So since 1914, we've had 2 other bridges prior to the one we have now.
That's right.
You remember the transition time between the 1st and 2nd?
I think it was a longer period of time than it was from the 2nd and the 3rd. But those old bridges had plank decks on them. They were iron bridges, but there were plank decks on the 2 old bridges. The one in the east end of town was replaced around 1930. I don't know when the one was replaced, the 2nd bridge in the west end of town. But I remember the 3 bridges at the 2 locations. Yeah.
Now, the businesses in Coatesville at that time, there were quite a few, I'm sure. You mentioned to me in particular pharmacies.
Well, Coatesville was sort of a center for the farming region around us, and Friday and Saturday nights you couldn't find a place to walk on the streets in Coatesville. And those pharmacies totaled about 12, I think, from the west end to the east end.
And they all managed to make a living.
Apparently so.
Yes.
They all were busy. Most of the stores back in those days were rather profitable.
And schools then, how are they different?
The schools?
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you
I
how
know
they were
there
different.
weren't quite as many of them, were there?
No, and if you lived as far away as Martin's Corner, you walked to school, Coatesville High School. I used to walk 2 miles to the Coatesville High School.
Which was where?
Well, I lived in Hayti at that time.
Uh-huh. And which high school are we talking about? Because I know there have been...
Gordon.
Gordon.
Yeah.
Mr. Whiteman, you've had quite a history of service in our community over the years. I know you've been president of many organizations that have been active in terms of community service here. Tell us about your work with the YMCA.
Well, I've been a member of the YMCA for many years, and presently I'm on the corporate board. And when I was younger, we used to go swimming in the YMCA. We used to call it the pit because it was hot and steaming in there. But when I started to work at Lucan's, I became more active in fund solicitations and things like that for the YMCA. And then later they had an affiliate by the name of Foreman's Club. And later it became the International Management Council. And I was past president, or am past president of the Foreman's Club. And I just felt that I owed something back to the YMCA, and that's why I've stayed active so long. I'm still on the corporate board up there.
You were active with them during the transition from their old location to their current?
Oh, yes.
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 How did that come about?
Well, it came about mostly because of a fire. And the Department of Labor in Pennsylvania declared the place unsafe because the old YMCA was a dormitory type YMCA. They had rooms up above the program and activity rooms back in those days. The fire put us out of business.
I remember going to the basement of the Y and going to bowling leagues
alleys
on Friday nights.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was an active place. And of course the auditorium, that was the center of town for the picture shows and things.
The movie theater.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've also been associated for a very long time with the Washington Hose Company, one of our fire companies here in town. And you've seen a transition with their location as well, haven't you?
Yes. I am a life member of the Washington Hose Company. Back in the late 30s and during the Second World War, I was an extra driver there, an ambulance driver, because a lot of our younger fellows had gone overseas, and we were really short-handed a lot in town. Mm-hmm. And that was a huge structure to the old Washington Hose Company with a parlor up above the engine room, mm-hmm. and the store, and the game room in the back, and the banquet room upstairs, and the meeting room on the third floor also. It's a shame that that building has gone down. It's neglected.
Mm-hmm. I remember as a boy going on a school tour and seeing the names of the horses that used to be over the stalls when the fire trucks were pulled by horses. And I know you made an interesting comment regarding a piece of equipment that was left behind from those days.
Yeah, that was what we called the old steamer. You remember when you were in there, it had high wheels in the back where the boiler was. And that was originally horse-drawn. And they motorized the front end to drive it as a motor vehicle. Mm-hmm. But the old wheels were still on it, the rear wheels.
You've also been very active in your church. Which church was that?
The First Baptist Church of Coatesville. Mm-hmm. I served as usher in the board of trustees there at that church.
And a Sunday school teacher as well, I understand.
Yes, that's right.
Are there any differences that you've noticed in the issues that are covered in a Sunday school lesson over the years?
No, I wouldn't say there's too much of a change in the issues. It's just that it's more difficult to get people out to something called Sunday school. Mm-hmm. When I was a kid, my family was Presbyterian, and when we lived in Rock Run then, there was a chapel up there, which is sponsored by the Presbyterian Church of Coatesville. And I can remember being what they called the primary class, little kids. Sundays, your mother washing you up and getting you all prettied up, you know, to go to Sunday school 2 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. And then as things progressed, I got older, I moved on out into the large room and got into a boys' class. And of course, I didn't change to the Baptist until after I was married, because I married into a Baptist family, and they worked on me.
You've also received some awards from our community. What does it take to become a member of the Coatesville Hall of Fame?
Well, I really don't know, because I was surprised when I got it. I do my volunteer work because I want to do it to help somebody, and I don't do it for awards. If awards come, it's a surprise to me. I remember one time that a fellow that I worked with asked me to go to a Lions Club meeting with him. And I agreed, and when I got there and the program went on, I found out I was a recipient of the Boss of the Year award from the Lions Club, and that was a real surprise to me. But I like to do the volunteer work because I feel from my heart I'm helping somebody else and helping my community.
Mr. Whiteman, I once heard it said that bad officials are elected by good people who don't vote. And I know that you must have some very definite opinions on that particular statement, because you're someone who has a continuous voting record of 50 years or more.
Well, I look at it as a privilege and a right to be able to vote people into office. And I wish everyone would go to the polls. And it's unfortunate that we don't have people go. But I never realized until I received that recognition from the county commissioners, the representatives, and the Senate of Pennsylvania, Governor Ridge, and so on, that I had over a 50-year voting record. And I think everyone should go to the polls, but first, study the candidates.
Yes. Well, in those 50 years, have you noticed any changes in your philosophy about what makes a good candidate?
No, I don't like to say it this way, but I look for honesty and integrity in a candidate. There's so many times that you'll hear one thing, and when somebody gets in office, they go in the other direction, and that's kind of misleading.
Are there any candidates in particular that come to mind that you were especially happy you voted for, or maybe on the other hand sorry that you did?
Well, for closeness, Bob Thompson, Senator Bob Thompson.
Yes.
I knew him from working at Lucan's, and I worked with him at Lucan's, and I knew what kind of a man he was, and I was happy to vote for Bob. And I can't think back of any of the governors, or some that I didn't have much choice, so I don't like to name names.
I understand. Mr. Whiteman, you've been a past president of the Optimist Club. I'm curious to know about your affiliation with the Optimist Club and what kind of work it's done for our community.
Well, the Optimist Club was a chapter of Optimist International, and Coatesville was chartered back, I believe, in November of 1949. I became a member a year or two after that. And of course, their motto was "Friend of the Boy." And most of the work was done for the boy. But then later, it was decided that we should direct our efforts to all youth. And so the motto became "Friend of the Youth." And we Did a number of different things in the community here. We would put on punt, pass, and kick programs for the little kids to give them a chance to get familiar with the football. The same way with basketball. We used to go up to the YMCA and put on programs there for the little kids and give them a chance to shoot and pass to a mark on a wall and to dribble and things like that. Also, we did the same with the soccer program. And we did a number of different things for the children in the community, bicycle safety inspections, things like that. Unfortunately, our charter was canceled, I think in June of 1996, because we couldn't get members to come out to meetings. They were getting older, and we couldn't get the young fellows in. You know, like they say, keep your organization alive, you got to get the young blood in there. But with television and things like that today, and mothers and fathers both working and not getting a chance to spend time with the children, you can't get them interested in being a club member. And I think all service clubs feel a pinch on that.
Well, speaking of service clubs, you've also been affiliated with the Red Cross as well, haven't you?
Well, yes, several years I chaired their fund drives to help get some money in, because I believed in helping out the Red Cross. Same thing with the Salvation Army, too.
Well, in conclusion, I'd like to ask you how you got tied in with Coatesville Senior Center. You've been the president there as well?
Yes, and I served on the board at the center. I was just asked by a friend, Tom Oates, who was going off the board, would I be willing to serve if he put his name in for a nomination for his vacant spot on the board. And apparently I got elected. And the problem is when you become I call myself a professional volunteer. And when you become that, everyone's trying to tap you on the shoulder. But I try to give as much as I can to the community.
Well, we're certainly glad that you do, and we appreciate having you with us to help this community in so many, very many ways that you have done that. And I thank you again for being here with us today, Mr. Herman L. Whiteman.
Thank you, sir.